This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. So now that we have reports this week that Paul Manafort is going to be indicted, the D.C. press corps can resume their regularly scheduled Russian collusion propagandizing. And that's what they're doing on a lot of fronts. You've got the Manafort stories. You've got, you got Maxine Waters. I mean, you always have no justice, no peace, Maxine, and we always like to hear from her. This from an interview she gave at a convention or conference for the National Black Caucus Foundation. Maxine Waters, ladies and gentlemen.
Don't come here and tell me, Maxine, you keep on doing what you do. Maxine gonna keep on doing what you do. But when you gonna give me some support? How many of you in your organizations have said impeach 45? Oh no, don't understand that. Well, they don't have what it takes. They don't have the laws yet. Impeachment is about whatever the Congress says it is. There is no law that dictates impeachment. What the Constitution says is high crimes and misdemeanors, and we define that.
All right. For a response to that foray on the law, we're pleased to be joined by not as accomplished a legal scholar as Maxine Waters, but somebody that is a practitioner of the law, was federal prosecutor, now a contributing editor at National Review Online. He's Andy McCarthy. Andy, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much. I feel like I can't imagine that Maxine actually read my book on this subject, but I pretty much agree with her.
Yeah, she can have a full report on your desk too.
She's not much of a reader, I don't think. But you pretty much agree with Maxine Waters. But I assume you're pretty much agreeing in a less celebratory fashion.
Well, I don't agree with her that Trump's done anything impeachable. But what I mean is that impeachment is a political remedy, not a legal one. And it's up to Congress to decide what high crimes and misdemeanors are. But you would think that Congress would do that against the framework of what the framers describe high crimes and misdemeanors as, which are, as Hamilton put it, the offenses of public men. And what he meant by that they were profound breaches of the public trust, dereliction of duty, conduct unbecoming, almost like a military justice concept. But the impeachment process is laid out in the Constitution, and it's really not regulable by the courts much, because it was meant by the framers as a congressional check on the presidency. And the genius of the framers is that while it only takes a majority of the House to file articles of impeachment, no president can be removed unless you get a two-thirds supermajority in the Senate trial. And what that means is that unless a president has done something that's so heinous that there's a consensus in the country that the president needs to be removed, that cuts across ideological and partisan lines, it'll never happen. And that's why it hasn't happened.
Right. So profound were the founders in their thinking that they predicted Maxine Waters, is what you're saying.
Yes. Well, they were probably guarding against her, but yes, exactly.
All right. So in regards to Paul Manafort, what do you think he'll be indicted on? What do you think the charges will be?
Well, it's hard to tell now, because a lot of what they're doing is being done secretly, although the hardball stuff they're doing, like the way that they searched Manafort's house, is obviously something that they've been pretty public about, and I think that's the purpose of that, is to intimidate other witnesses and subjects, just like they were trying to intimidate Manafort. I would, Amy, I'd feel safe saying this much. I think whatever Manafort is charged with, if he's charged, and I think that may be a bluff too, but we'll have to see. But I think whatever he's charged with will be some steps removed from what this was supposed to be all about in the beginning, which was complicity in what's said to be Russian espionage aimed at the 2016 election. I'd be very, very surprised if any charges come out of that.
What's the big story this week for you in this topic area? Assuming the reporting is accurate, just start from that assumption, kind of if the reporting is true. Is it the possibility of Manafort being indicted? Is it Manafort allegedly suggesting private briefings with a Russian aluminum magnate that it was apparently allegedly connected to the Kremlin? Is it Facebook turning over $150,000 worth of Facebook ads that are allegedly linked to Russia? Or is it the reporting about the FISA warrants and the surveillance of Manafort, and then ultimately down the road, the second go-around, ostensibly the surveillance of Manafort that could have included both candidate Trump as well as other campaign associates?
Well, I think the last part, as far as the FISA stuff is concerned, I've been surprised a bit at what a big story it's been, and maybe it's because it fills in some details that we didn't have before. But you would think we had never heard this. And, the New York Times was reporting that there were FISA warrants that involved Manafort and others, I think, as early as January. I started writing about it shortly after that. Now, based on the CNN report, we know more specific detail about that than we did before. And, at the time that Clapper, the National Intelligence Director, in March, after Trump did his famous tweets about Obama tapping his lines at Trump Tower, when Clapper gave what was pitched as a denial to Chuck Todd on NBC and the Sunday show, and everybody in the media then basically used that to whitewash what Trump had said and said, that kind of stuff never happened. We now have somebody who was in the know who gave a categorical denial. I encouraged people at the time to look carefully at what Clapper had said, because I thought it was a very carefully couched, narrow denial, not a sweeping denial, and that it didn't discount the possibility of what we now know actually happened, which was that there was Obama administration spying on Trump associates, some of whom were connected to the campaign. So a lot of this stuff, I think, we actually knew already, those of us who've been following the story closely. But Dan, I must say the thing that sticks out to me more than anything else is the comparison between the scorched earth approach that the Mueller investigation is taking to the Trump campaign versus what I think is the real collusion story of the 2016 election, which is the way that the Obama Justice Department and intelligence agencies, other components of the executive branch, were put in the service of Hillary Clinton's campaign. So on the one hand, you have Mueller, who's hired these 17 really alpha-type aggressive lawyers who are turning under every stone and using every hardball tactic in the book to squeeze a case out of something that doesn't look to me like a criminal offense, at least what they were originally brought in to investigate. And then you compare that to how the FBI and the Obama Justice Department went about the Clinton investigation, where they basically put blinders on every time they found mountainous evidence of criminal wrongdoing. And they went every step they could possibly go to close their eyes to what certainly looks like an offense that should have been charged. And I just think it's mind-boggling to compare the two things.
Well, I mean, this is the point that Holman Jenkins makes in the Wall Street Journal when he writes, now ask yourself, were the evolving claims about Russia's motives based on any more solid intelligence than were the Trump dossier or Russia's fake Loretta Lynch email? Or is the picture here of our intelligence officials serially grabbing after whatever floats them serves their immediate needs? He goes on to suggest what Daniel Greenfield has also suggested, that this started to ratchet up after Trump had a surprise victory, and Obama administration officials realized that perhaps their actions in in the course of the 2016 cycle were going to receive more scrutiny than they ever conceived they would receive?
Well, look, I think there's a lot to the notion that these agencies ought to be pressed on what they did and what information they provided to courts in order to get surveillance on the opposition political party. I've said from the start that if they really, in good faith and hard evidence, not politicized supposition, thought that there was a Russian operation to compromise the American electoral process, and Trump was in on it, or people in the Trump camp were in on it, I'd be the first person to say that absolutely is something that has to be investigated, even though it's explosive to investigate the political opposition. But if you're just exploiting your executive power to do investigations in the realm of national security and foreign intelligence as a pretext to do political spying, that's a major scandal. And it seems to me that if it's important to get to the bottom of whether there was Russian espionage and collusion, and certainly if there's any evidence of that, it is important to get to the bottom of it. It's also critically important to get to the bottom of whether we had political spying going on here.
So how do you interpret Chuck Grassley's letter to Christopher Wray, Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley sending a letter to FBI Director Chris Wray asking if the Trump administration, campaign was briefed about the possible Russian threat to give them a chance to take precautionary measures if this threat was so present?
I think that that's something that absolutely ought to be run down, and I also think to the extent that the FBI and the Justice Department have stonewalled the congressional committees on the genesis and of this Trump dossier and what the FBI's relationship was with this Steele character, and the question whether, which is something I think is an important question to get to the bottom of now that we know about this FISA stuff, did the FBI use information that was in that dossier as part of what it presented to the FISA court to get permission to do surveillance on Manafort and these other guys? I think that's all critically important. And if I agree in principle with what I take to be Grassley's position, that it's not tolerable that the FBI and the Justice Department are not being forthcoming with information. And I frankly don't understand how it is that the FBI and the Justice Department, now under Trump's supervision, are withholding information from the Republican-controlled Congress, which is trying to get to the bottom of whether the Obama administration spied on the Trump campaign. I don't understand what's going on there.
He is Andy McCarthy, former federal prosecutor in Manhattan, now contributing editor at National Review. You can always check out his pieces. He's written extensively on this, including his piece, Paul Manafort is in Legal Jeopardy, that you'll want to read in detail. Andy McCarthy, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Have a great weekend.
You too.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.